Hi everybody, welcome to a moving version of Indycar. I hope you can hear me this time. Those of you who missed the broadcast earlier on due to poor sound, let me know if you can hear this okay. Anyway, the broadcast earlier on was meant to tell you that Dr Mark McNaught of the University of Rennes published an article this morning about why he thinks that we need to hold the Indyref this summer before September. For the simple reason that the British government has completely failed to honour all of its promises to the European Union about things like the border in Northern Ireland being invisible or frictionless in some way, and also about the right of European citizens to remain in the United Kingdom after Brexit. Now, his points are quite simply that the Northern Irish border controls, which the British government was proposing should be done electronically, are impossible. The European Union negotiators ripped them apart mercilessly and have completely rejected every single proposal that the UK government has made. They've accused the British government and its negotiators of magical thinking. Now, magical thinking is unicorns and rainbows. It's plucking things out of thin air and making stuff up. So they're obviously disgusted at the way the British government is treating this business of the Irish border. So they have rejected all the proposals made by the British government, and they have also rejected any idea that there should be a border of any kind between Ireland and Northern Ireland and the Republic, and also any border in the sea between Ireland and the Republic. So that is all nonsense. British government's failed in that. And so because of that one thing, actually, the entire negotiations cannot go ahead anyway, because that was something the British government promised it would do, and it hasn't. And it hasn't got long to put it right. It has only until September in which to fix this problem. And the European Union negotiators don't believe that it can be fixed in that timescale. Okay, now the other thing that they were angry about, the Europeans, and quite rightly so, is the fact that because of British incompetence at the Home Office, both under the Labour government and under Theresa May's Home Office, the so-called Windrush generation, the tens of thousands of people who migrated from former British colonies in the Caribbean and in other places, in places like India as well, to come and work in the UK and to live here as full residents with full rights as British citizens. They can't even guarantee that. They've in fact got to the point now where they're deporting their own British citizens. And the European Union does not believe for 1 minute that the British government is competent enough to treat any European citizen any better than that. So they don't believe a word of this from the British government. So for these reasons alone, it means that the Brexit negotiations cannot proceed. They cannot go to the part that's important, where they try to negotiate a trade deal. Now, sorry if the camera's juddering a bit. It's the state of the roads in this country under the auspices of the UK. We could have better roads, I think, if we spent some of our oil money on them. Anyway, but the point is, the European Union cannot do a trade deal with the UK under these circumstances because the UK government has not fulfilled their side of the bargain. And that means that there will be no transition period. There will be no 21-month easing into the new regime and harmonising standards and things like that. Instead of that, what will happen is on the 29th of March next year, we're going to fly off the edge of a cliff and plummet, because there's going to be nothing and no legislation to govern what happens afterwards. Freefall Brexit. As Dr McNaught pointed out, on the 29th of March next year, you will not be able to get a flight into Europe. You will not be able to send anything, any parcels into Europe. You will not be able to import or export anything from Europe. All treaties, 250 odd treaties negotiated by Europe on our behalf, will have disappeared and evaporated overnight. The human rights of everybody in the United Kingdom will evaporate. the rights of individuals who came here with leave to stay will evaporate overnight. The ability to trade across the Northern Irish border will disappear overnight. Everything that we currently have in the way of trading agreements, deals, customs arrangements and export deals with other countries will have to be rewritten. We're talking about somewhere in the region of 400 new treaties would need to be negotiated before March the 29th. I can't see the British government, which has difficulty even solving one problem, managing to fix nearly 400 problems inside the next 5 or 6 months. So, unlike Pete Wishart, who believes that we should have a referendum after Britain has destroyed Scotland, I think, and Dr Mark believes as well, and he is a respected political science expert who listens to the European Union and is living in Europe and in touch with their politicians, Mark believes that that Pete Wishart is wrong, plain wrong, that he hasn't taken into account the fact that the British government is failing in all of its Brexit arrangements, and therefore we're not going to have that time to wait until 2020, because the Scottish government may have been abolished by then. Because, as Mark points out, if we hard Brexit, Britain will have nothing to live on except Scottish exports, and the only way it can do that is if it abolishes Holyrood, takes control of everything, and sells everything that we've got to the highest bidder, sells licenses to make whiskey to the Americans, to the South Americans, to the Japanese. And that's exactly what he believes will happen, because otherwise Britain will not have enough money to sustain itself, and there will not be any trade deals with anybody to help to stabilise it. And so he feels that if we don't act this year, and certainly we have to act before September, because September was the deadline set by the European Union trade negotiators for all three of these issues that the British government is supposed to fix to have been fixed. And so far we know that none of them has been fixed, and none of the fixes that have been suggested are acceptable to the European Union. Not a single one of them. The British government has completely and abjectly failed to come up with anything. So we must have our referendum this summer. There isn't any other option. If we wait any longer, our human rights will disappear, our Scotland Act will vanish, everything will vanish overnight, evaporate. All the things that underpin the integrity of Scottish devolution will simply be stripped away by a desperate British government, which will have no other option but to consolidate its control over every other minor or smaller country in the Union. That means Northern Ireland, hard border will have to happen. It means Wales, well, it's already subsumed into England as it is, but it also means that Scotland will lose its parliament, will lose all our representatives. The SNP will have just the MPs that it's got at the moment in Westminster, and we all know that they are totally outgunned down there, outnumbered down there, and can do nothing. How are we going to get a Section 30 order in 2 years' time after Holyrood Parliament's been abolished and all control over Scottish affairs has been taken back to Westminster? Remember that these 111 laws that are coming back from the European Union, if there's a hard Brexit, the British government will just take them back anyway, and that will mean fracking everywhere in the United Kingdom, including here. It'll mean continued nuclear dumping here. It'll mean continued cutting of funding for wind farms. It'll mean the forcing of burning more hydrocarbons, because the British government is not in favour of renewable energy. They are not interested in that. The British government is supported by the petrodollar. In other words, we're in the pockets of the Americans here, which is why Britain is so keen to do a deal with America, because America is the only country with the immense power necessary to rescue Britain from its own stupidity. So, in short, Dr Mark's warning is right. We must have a referendum this summer. We cannot wait until 2021. That would be absolute stupidity. And I don't believe anybody in the movement would countenance that kind of thing. Anyway, the second part of this broadcast is going to be a little bit shorter, partly because I'm nearly home. The second part of this is another contributor this morning pointed something out to me, and that was that the voting system in the Scottish Parliament is designed to ensure that the three British parties will always have enough votes to create a coalition which can outnumber the SNP, which is why, incidentally, we have a weakened Scottish National Party government at the moment. It's working without a majority just now. Although it did buck the system once, it can't repeat it now, and it's likely we'll lose more seats at the next Scottish parliamentary election. Anyway, the suggestion has been made that if the independence movement itself coalesced into some kind of political entity, then we could put our own candidates up as pro-independence MSP candidates in the next Scottish general election. And using that to help the SNP and the Greens, we would form a trio of parties which is at least equal in numbers to the three British parties which put up candidates for MSP each year. So the idea would be, if this is necessary, that the Indie movement of everybody who's not an SNP member, not a card-carrying member, would put together a list of proposed candidates ourselves who would stand in selected seats where we knew we could beat the British parties because we're not the SNP, but we are pro-independence, not SNP members. And this is a way of confounding the system by producing a three-party system for pro-independence as well as the three-party anti-independence coalition. So we'd be much more balanced when it came to the election. Now, it's an interesting idea. The only problem is, after next year, there might not be a parliament for us to have an election to, and therefore the whole thing might just be moot, it might be academic. So it's another thing to think about, though, and I think it's a good idea that I think we should do it anyway. We should still have pro-independence, non-party members selected, maybe by popular vote online amongst the Indie movement, put together maybe a short list of, who knows, maybe 20 or 30 people who might make good politicians, and put them forward as candidates for the next Scottish parliamentary elections. That would be very interesting, because then we'd have the whole SNP with all of their candidates, we'd have the whole of the Green Party and all of their candidates, and we'd have the whole of the independence movement and our candidates together fighting against the British state. Who knows, it might help. But as I say, it might be too late by then. I'm not sure whether the Scottish Parliament will exist after the 29th of March next year. So that's the broadcast for today. I know it sounds a bit like doom and gloom, but it's a serious message, and it's coming from a respected academic, a political science expert, a man who lectures at university on the subject, a man who's got his finger on the pulse in Europe, and a man who talks to people in Europe and knows what the European negotiating position is and how Britain is being viewed. The view from Europe at the moment is Britain is heading to a hard Brexit. Britain's not telling us that, though, are they? The British state media would have us believe that everything's hunky-dory, and we're all looking at the Skripals being poisoned. We're all watching the Syrian bombing campaign. We're all arguing online about these things, while silently in the background, British negotiations are failing with Europe. And because they're failing with Europe, we are staring down the barrel of a hard Brexit with no lead-in period, no 21-month period of grace. So I don't think there'll be time for a referendum in 2020, because I think by that time the Scottish Parliament will be closed, and it'll probably become a museum to Scottish aspirations if we let it. So I'll sign off from this rather sort of dour-sounding message today and just say, think about this. It's time now. There's never ever going to be a more propitious time to have a referendum than right now, this summer. Because believe me, if we wait any longer and we're taken out of the European Union with nothing, no safety net, no agreements, We're going to become the 51st state of America, and everything Scottish will vanish overnight. Bye for now.